guys, and everyone, welcome to another Garry's Mod and Half-Life lore video. In this video I will be discussing why I think that Aiden Walker is actually more of a liability for the Combine than a useful tool, you know. So this is a kinda pose screenshot I made myself. Anyways, I'm probably gonna use it as a background for the video maybe. So let me turn the sound down a bit. Right. So, for those who know and have played the Half-Life 2 expansions, Entropy 0 and Entropy 02, you probably know who Aiden Walker, aka 3650 is. He's a former Arizonian prison guard who once had a wife and a daughter. However, his wife, died because of an illness, and his daughter was abducted and is presumed dead. Now, there were no leads. Okay, there were no leads of who abducted his daughter. As to who abducted his daughter, this led the police to believe that it was Aiden Walker himself who did it, that he was some sort of maniac or psychopath who simply killed his own daughter, even though this wasn't true and it was a completely unjustified conviction. Eventually Walker was sent to a mental health institution. He was, in his own words, medicated, outcasted from society because of something that he didn't do, because of his daughter's disappearance and death. And eventually the Combine arrived. Now obviously, understandably, Aiden Walker had a lot of hatred towards people. He had a very strong feeling of misanthropy. And when the Combine arrived, he eagerly joined the Civil Protection, and he was known to be very efficient and very good. As a Civil Protection officer, he was very loyal to the Combine because the Combine promised him that in his own words, the Combine listened to him and they told him that the problems of the mind are not the problems of the soul, and that they do acknowledge that he is innocent in his daughter's disappearance and prison death. Aiden Walker was given the unit number 3650, and he was said to be very brutal and overall very loyal and lethal. As a Civil Protection officer, he simply was ruthless, wasn't really afraid of anything, and really made sure that resistance has absolutely no chance. One day, Aiden Walker got late to work, late to his shift. This led to the chief of the precinct to assign him to a so-called head crab duty, meaning he had to clean head crabs out of the vents of the Civil Protection base in City 17. While he was doing so, crawling through the vents as still a Metro cop, he overheard a conversation of other Civil Protection officers, as I said, Aiden Walker was very disliked by his own peers, by his own colleagues, by the other Metro cops, because you probably know most people in the civil protection are actually very disloyal to the Combine. The only reason they joined is purely for self-serving reasons. They didn't join to serve the Combine or join for the greater good. They just joined to get better food, a better bed to sleep in at the end of the day, and maybe some help for their family as well. However, Aiden was different. Aiden joined out of actual loyalty, So he was nicknamed Bootlicker by his own peers. Anyways, the conversation he overheard had to do with these about 3 or 4, I don't really remember, civil protection officers planning to, quote-unquote, fudge his numbers, or basically hijack his database and sabotage his perks and his work. Now this enraged him, and since he obviously hated them because he faced, or they kind of bullied him around, he obviously had no idea or no reason to spare them. He basically found a pistol and shot all of them dead. This resulted in the precinct chief to assign him to outlands duty because they knew that Aiden Walker is a ticking bomb that isn't hesitating to fire into his own ranks and has kind of low impulse control, which I don't really blame him because Aiden Walker has faced a lot of injustice, and I think that he has every reason to not like people. I mean, I myself don't really like people, I don't really think people are good species, so in my opinion, joining the Combine was pretty much the only rational decision he could make. Because he doesn't owe dog shit to people. I mean, people literally betrayed him, people ruined his life, People are the ones who accused him of something so heinous as killing his own daughter when it wasn't true. Now there is a rumor in the Entropy Zero community that he might have actually killed his daughter, but that he's just psychotic and he doesn't either remember it or doesn't want to admit it. But I think that's bullshit and it's not even canon, and it has been proven that Aiden Walker did not actually kill his daughter, confirmed. He did not, he was forcefully convicted of this because the cops just didn't really want to bother making any actual effort at solving the case. So they were like, oh yeah, that guy is a prison guard, yeah, he probably killed his own daughter, and they just threw him into a mental hospital for several years, and but we already went over that. And so when the high-ranking Metro cop, realized that Aiden Walker is really kind of a ticking bomb and could cause more disorder and chaos in the civil protection of that specific precinct of City 17 he was serving in, he was assigned to outlands duty to clear out a rebel base, a rebel hideout, which he and his squad of other Metro cops did very successfully. As I said, Aiden Walker was very good at the job. He was very tactically skilled, most likely because he was a combatant or had some sort of combative training in his previous job. As I say, he was a prison guard, so naturally he had some sort of combative training, and therefore he had that advantage over other Metro cops who were purely of civilian origin and never really received any combative training at all. And when his squad successfully completed the mission and they were returning back to City 17, they were actually very far away from City 17, it seems like. While they were raiding a razor train, they suddenly got ambushed by rebels, which crashed the train, killing every other Metro cop inside except Walker. Aiden Walker was the only one who survived. And this ambush happened in abandoned City 10. Now, as we previously discussed, City 10 is set in St. Petersburg, Russia. So like, I don't know, 2,000 kilometers away, maybe more, maybe like 3,000, I don't know, away from City 17, which is in Bulgaria. And Aiden Walker actually survived. Even in City 10 he was able to outmaneuver the rebels, and City 10 was completely overtaken by rebels. The combined presence in there was practically zero because City 10 was infected by the sea flu, you know, the alien virus that basically liquidated most of the transhuman forces in there, because it could kill normal people, but it mostly killed the combined transhumans, you know, like the Overwatch soldiers. Most likely they were vulnerable, maybe because of their modified transhuman bodies, I'm not really sure. Anyways, Aiden Walker was still a Metro cop, he still had his original biological body and he was a Metro cop. And after he survived that and even survived, you know, the boss fight at the end of the game with the Vortigaunt, the Combine realized how extremely valuable he is. I mean, already as a Metro cop, he survived all of this. You know, his service to the Combine was outstanding up to this point. I mean, he was very efficient and brutal as a Metro cop. He survived the terrible ambush and survived City 10 as a Metro cop, and eventually he was brought into Nova Prospect for memory transfer. The Combine scanned his brain, basically his entire memory, and uploaded it as a data file into their own database, into the Combine memory bank. Now this process is destructive, and his body was already very badly wounded after the fight at the end of the game, so this process just finished him, you know, put him out, and he even though his original body died in Nova Prospect, that doesn't really matter because the Combine could now upload his like literally one-to-one copy of his personality into these mass-produced Overwatch Elite chassis you see in front of you. These are two of his clones. And the Combine realized that since he is driven and motivated primarily by extreme feelings of vengeance, grievance, and misanthropy, they could kinda use it to, let's just say, make him do what the Combine need, under the promise of helping him find his daughter, which is something, or at least helping him find out what happened to his daughter and who might have done something to her, which is what Aiden Walker wanted to know. And then they just started mass producing, and now the Combine cloning is not one-to-one biological copies, as you might probably know from movies. Instead, how Combine cloning works is if they see the individual have like a personality like Aiden Walker, like very ruthless, brutal, highly, like extremely skilled, and very loyal. They will take that, scan it from the original body, upload it into a Combine memory bank, and then upload it into other Overwatch soldiers. That's why they let Aiden Walker, 3650 retain all, or at least most of his original personality and free will, because he was more efficient with free will than these standard memory replaced Overwatch soldiers. And then once they, could take Overwatch elites, which were made from like other people that underwent transhumanization, they made the base Overwatch elite, and then uploaded Aiden Walker's memory into it, like his whole personality. Suddenly you basically had a unstoppable killing machine. Overwatch elites are the toughest soldiers, the Universal Union has to offer via the transhuman arm. And paired with how extremely deadly 3650 already is, they made the perfect soldiers, or seemingly perfect soldiers for the Combine. They could tell him, hey, if you do that, and this and that, we will let you know who and what happens to your daughter, and this was the highest motivation for him. And also they let him keep his faculties to make him efficient, because obviously you cannot really motivate a soldier without faculties, except just give them orders for them to fulfill. But that extreme grievance and hatred Aiden Walker held, it basically made him a war engine, Well, however, there was one issue with this project, and it is why I think that Aiden Walker actually at the end became just the expense and a liability for the Combine instead of the perfect tool. The issue was that, meanwhile, letting these clones keep their faculties, makes them highly motivatable and being able to be manipulated and kind of gullible. There is also an extreme danger of them turning against the Combine when they don't get what they want. And that is basically what happened with Clone Copy, that fucked up Combine elite you see on the left. That's one of Aiden Walker's older clones that was produced and put into service before the newer clone we know as Bad Cop, which is on the right. The one with clean uniform. Clone Cop was sent on a mission, the Combine sent Aiden Walker's clones on a mission to capture Judith Mossman, because it was an extremely critical mission for the Combine, because Judith Mossman originally worked for the Combine, but eventually betrayed them and joined the Resistance. And she was a scientist with highly confidential knowledge of the Borealis, of local teleportation technology, all of this scientific know-how the Combine needed to master local teleportation. And they sent these extremely potent clones of Aiden Walker in the bodies of Overwatch elites to capture her. older clone called Clone Cop failed that mission. He and his squad were overwhelmed by rebels, and eventually they knocked him out and dragged him into not sure if knocked him out, but eventually he found himself, cut off from Overwatch. The Overwatch even told him that he failed the mission and that his perks will not be provided because he's a failure, right? Well, he got then kinda pissed off because he was like, oh, well, the Combine, he kinda became self-aware, and he was like, well, the Combine didn't give me what I want, even though they promised me. He realized that he might have been perhaps a bit thrown around and manipulated, and he started working as a one-man army. He worked both against the Combine and the Resistance. Now, the Combine didn't really get any updates on him because he cut out his transponder chip out of his brain. That's why he has the open skull. A transponder chip is a critical part of the transhuman anatomy of the soldiers, because it basically establishes a neural link between them and the Overwatch Central. And once that link is severed, by, for example, surgically removing him like he did, the Combine no longer gets updates on that specific unit's state. And so they thought that Clone Cop probably got killed, and they sent another clone, which is our protagonist in Entropy 02, known as Bad Cop. Now, it is mentally the same person, Entropy 02 at its core is about fighting yourself, basically, a clone of Walker fighting another clone of Walker, but mentally they're the same people. Obviously biologically they're completely different bodies, because as I said, they're not one-to-one, Walker's original body died at the end of the game, and the elites these are just standard mass-produced elites with just a different chest emblem to distinguish them from the other elites that have no faculties, the standard ones. The only reason why elite clones of 3650 have the blue chest service medal is that they're distinguishable from the standard Overwatch elites, which have no faculties and stuff like that. Anyways, after this new clone is sent on he's sent on the same mission, since the previous clone failed it, and several others failed it as well. Several others barely got out of their stasis pods at the start of the game in the basement of Nova Prospect. When you exit your stasis pod, you see a bunch of other dead 3650 clones on the ground. A bunch of these dead elites with the blue chest ribbon. And you are the newest clone. You're sent on the same mission to capture Judith Mossman. And then you eventually meet your older clone along the way. He keeps telling you that, hey, screw the Combine, let's get what we want together, they're not gonna give you what you want. And obviously, Aiden Walker, of course, does not really listen, because, it seems like this is just some freaking dumbass, defective clone. And he was right, Clone Cop was kinda driven insane and he was defective, you know. Anyways, 3650 just kinda ignores it as a background noise, you know, and even though he has like armed altercations with him where Clone Cop almost kills him and Judith, eventually Judith is safely escorted. Bad Cop accomplishes the mission, unlike Clone Cop, and eventually the advisor, which is the mission control and handle for Bad Cop, tells him to get rid of Clone Cop since Clone Cop was, and therefore Aiden Walker, another Aiden Walker was, you know, actively sabotaging the Combine's operations. Bad Cop is tasked with neutralizing Clone Cop as well, which turns out to be easier said than done, since Clone Cop wasn't going to go down without the fight. But here is the core premise. Even though they sent a clone of Aiden Walker, you know, and he actually accomplished the mission, a previous clone of the same person was actively disrupting it, and it was the same person. Mentally, their personalities were exactly one-to-one, you know. Both of them had their faculties left as well. And this already shows that Aiden Walker was a effective but also a highly volatile and potentially extremely unstable asset that could be a double-edged sword for the Combine. Because he can eventually accomplish even some of the hardest missions because of how, you know, highly skilled and ruthless he is, because there's basically nothing left in him, right? I mean, the world and the society broke him, but if you don't give them what they want, they're gonna go absolutely nuts and gonna make sure to damage the Combine as much as possible. Once again, this shows he is potentially highly unstable. Now to skip forward, you eventually do defeat him, and then you meet up with the advisor at the Borealis. Now there's two endings in the game. There's the Combine ending, in which you give in to the advisor, which eventually wipes your faculties because they don't really honestly need you to have free will anymore, you know. The both objectives were accomplished. Judith Mossman is captured and Clone Cop is neutralized. The unstable clone is neutralized, right? So there is, at this point, zero reason for the advisor and the Combine to allow you to have your faculties. If you give in, your faculties are wiped, you undergo basically memory replacement, and they probably leave some of your tactical skills intact, because that is what makes these clones so useful in the first place. But they don't really need you to have your personal grievances and stuff like that, because they're not really useful for anything anymore. They were only useful for driving you forward to achieve your mission or your prime objective. But now that that's been achieved, hey, you don't really need that. And I mean, it is true, you know, it is true. I do completely agree with that. And you give it to the Combine. Eventually, Bad Cop is killed by Gordon Freeman, presumably at the end of Entropy 02 in the Combine ending in the post-credit scene, but that doesn't really matter because the Combine can just mass-produce you, because they got your entire memory, your entire you, your entire Aiden Walker, you know, scanned in the memory bank. or there is the other ending, because Combine ending is not considered canon by developers of Entropy 02, because the other game they're developing, Axe and Paria, is actually centered around bad cop turning defective as well and sabotaging the Combine and fighting against the Combine while he still has his faculties left as an Overwatch elite. So therefore the Combine ending is not canon, and Bradman himself said that the Combine betrayal ending, if you can call it that, is the canon one, because that is what is succeeded by the Axe Imperial game. Anyways, in this ending you turn against the Combine, you kill the advisor, you eventually reunite with Wilson again if you brought him to the upload station, the AI upload station, and the game ends, and that is when Axe Imperial is supposed to kick off. But here, in conclusion, it shows that Aiden Walker, meanwhile he was originally highly usable as a civil protection and then as clones as Overwatch Elite, once he realized that he's not really getting what he wants so badly, because I mean there's not really any need to, you know. I mean, in the Combine, the defection ending, you even meet up with G-Man eventually, which obviously the Combine sees as a pretty big threat, because they literally tell that you've been like infected or like you know, by the elusive one, which is their name for G-Man, the elusive one, because he's elusive, you know, it's kind of hard to contain him, and the world presumably wasn't a thing by the time of Half-Life 2 anymore, so yeah. And eventually Aiden Walker turned from the perfect soldier, the perfect tool, into the perfect liability and disability, you know. He betrayed the Combine, he even destroyed his imprint, you know, the G-Man teleports him to the Combine memory bank, where he destroys the like the slug-looking creature that holds Aiden's memories. Bad Cop stomps it to death, kicks it to death, and that means he basically destroyed the imprint, and the Combine cannot upload him into Overwatch Elites anymore. Which also makes him the last of his clones, meaning the Combine cannot really send another clone of Aiden Walker after you, because you physically destroyed the imprint. And that is the issue, you know. That makes you the last of the clones, the last of the once perfect soldier for the Combine, and then you just sabotage your work. You basically become Clone Cop 2.0. And that's why I think that it's probably best to leave Overwatch soldiers, and especially Overwatch elites, without their free will. And even though Aiden Walker was very loyal, very skilled and everything, I mean, of what use is that to you when he actively turns that skill against you, you know? So he's just a liability for the Combine, and that's why the project was kind of doomed from the beginning. It generally started as a good idea, a good concept, and it is a good concept, but it requires a lot of control, you know, because once these clones get out of control, it's kind of hard to stop them. I mean, already look how much damage Clone Cop has done, now look at the damage Bad Cop is causing in Examperia, you know. I haven't really played the game. I mean, obviously you can't play it because it's not released yet, but from what I know, it's basically supposed to be Bad Cop working against the Combine. So it is a double-edged sword, really. They can be the best weapon to turn against the Resistance, but they can also, you know, these clones, Aiden Walker over again. It can also be a weapon that literally explodes in your hand, you know. If you don't give it what it wants. Now you could say that morally he did nothing wrong because the Combine betrayed him. No, the Combine didn't betray him. You know, because the Combine were very well aware of what they're gonna do with him. Obviously, who knows if they even had the information to what happened to his daughter. They might not really have had that information in the first place. But they just acted on pure pragmatism. I mean, Aiden Walker, because he was once again driven by just, you know, just like human emotions, you know, like grievance, misanthropy, extreme vengeance, you know, injustice. It was very easy to weaponize that against him, to make him do what you want, and then just leave his tactical skill intact while wiping his faculties and make the perfect clones, you know. But that does not the canon ending, unfortunately, and yes. So in conclusion, to sum it up, it's a good concept, but it has some major flaws that need to be revised to make it bulletproof, and without some faculty altercation, or like without modifying his personality to a point where he cannot or very hardly turn against the Combine, because that I think was probably one of the mistakes. They left too much of his faculties intact. They should have wiped some of it while still have him that drive, you know, and motivation and everything to find out what happened, and that would have probably been the better outcome, but unfortunately that hasn't really happened, and the events at the end of Entropy Zero 2 happened, you know. Well, in conclusion, he is a dangerous thing to the Combine because of how unpredictable and how easily he can turn against the Combine if he doesn't get what he wants immediately. And also because he's just being controlled by instinct and emotions, you know. Which can be a good thing if you want him to do what you want, but it also can be a very bad thing if you don't give him what he wants and he's just gonna let his, you know, pathetic instinct take over him and just cause chaos. Well, as always, thanks for watching, and goodbye.